Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. And the number one reason why we are a failed state is that for the last 44 years, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Zanu PF has blatantly rigged the elections and got away with it. Fighting to end the Zanu PF dictatorship has now become the holy grail for the people of Zimbabwe. If we do not break this mold, the country will never have any meaningful economic development and will continue to sink deeper and deeper into the economic crisis and political paralysis. Zanu PF has rigged the elections ever since the country's independence in 1980. When the nation went to those elections, as much as the Lancaster House agreement between all the parties was that Zanu PF, like PF ZAPU, should withdraw all its operatives from the field during the campaign period. Zanu PF signed to that, but by the time they got back to Zimbabwe, they had changed their mind. They kept a significant number of their operatives in the field, and their instructions was to tell the people that if Zanu PF does not win the elections, the bush war would continue. And so the people voted to end the bush war. And in doing so, lost their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. Zanu PF, from the day they got into office, worked flat out to consolidate their hold on power by corrupting and coercion to create a de facto one-party state. The 1983 to 1987 Kukura Wundi was a massacre to force then led President Joshua Nkomo and his colleagues in PF ZAPU to sign the unit accords with Zanu PF, and thus cleared the way to impose the de facto one-party state. They finally did sign the unit accords in 1987. And ever since, the country has been a de facto one-party state. The only time the country has come nearest to holding free, fair, and credible elections was in 2008, when SADC had put enormous pressure on Zanu PF to carry out significant changes in the voting process. And so the March 2008 elections was the nearest the country has ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections. And what is interesting is that when Mnangagwa, in particular, realized that Zanu PF was losing, he stepped in, stopped ZEC from continuing with the count, and what followed is next 6 weeks of recounting 5 million votes. And the most important thing was to whittle down Morgan Tsvangirai's presidential votes to 47%, enough to force a runoff. And during the runoff, Mnangagwa and company used violence to make sure that Zanu PF, or Robert Mugabe's candidate, his presidential candidate, was elected. This is Mnangagwa boasting about the 2008 elections.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma-results abuda tiri party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvinhu gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
SADC, the AU, refused to give Zanu PF political legitimacy in 2008, following the blatant cheating in the March vote and the wanton violence in the runoff that followed. Zanu PF was forced to sign the 2008 Global Political Agreement, which gave birth to the GNU of 2008 to 2018. The tragedy is that that was the golden opportunity for Zimbabwe to implement the democratic reforms to dismantle the Zanu PF one-party dictatorship. Alas, Mugabe bribed our friends in the opposition, Morgan Tsvangirai and company, and they failed to implement even one token reform. And the rest is history. But such lost opportunities come at a price. Because at the end of the GNU, Zanu PF carte blanche powers to rig the elections were all intact. And so the regime has continued to rig the elections. This is Mnangagwa boasting last year after rigging the 2023 elections.
Vana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidza nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa, farai, because you are doing correct things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelection anafamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
The arrogance, the dismissive arrogance that we've had to put up with. SADC election observers, AU election observers condemned last year's elections as flawed and illegal. But they could not go the extra mile and deny Zanu PF political legitimacy as they did in 2008. Because the opposition had participated in those elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating, they are giving Zanu PF legitimacy. This is a problem of our own making. The same opposition who had failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU because Mugabe bribed them, is now the same opposition that is participating in flawed elections out of greed. I think what we have got in Zanu PF is a serious challenge for the people of Zimbabwe. But what has now emerged is that Zanu PF, Mnangagwa and these Zanu PF friends are now exporting their vote rigging skills to other nations in the region. Last month, October, Mozambique held their elections. And Zanu PF officials helped to rig those elections. There is evidence showing Zimbabweans voting in those elections. And yet when you're confronted with a regime that is so arrogant that says, deja vu, you know you're in serious trouble. Here is Zanu PF appointed ambassador to Mozambique, Matemadanda, once again denying that Zimbabwe did not interfere in last month's Mozambique elections.
About 300,000 Zimbabweans voted in the Mozambique election. Would you please shed more light on that?
You are right to say allegations. Allegations are allegations until they are proven. And I don't know who is going to prove. And I also don't know who has the statistic, because what we know is that everyone will agree that Zimbabwe's literacy rate is the highest in Africa, to mean that our people know the dangers of infringing other constitutions and laws. And as ambassador, I never came across a person who is said to be a Zimbabwean who voted. In fact, I was moving around. I didn't see one. And maybe what we want to do here is to deal with evidence so that we know that, yes, here they are on a queue a legitimate queue. Kwete zviri kuitwa zvokuinda vanhu vanomira musango kuti ndobva kumberengwa ndobva kwakati masanganiswa nei mubush.
So are you suggesting that those videos were...
I don't suggest, I'm telling you that those videos are fake. Because how do you get a person from Plumtree, that one from Rewa, that one from Manicaland, that one from Chinoi, being grouped together in a bush? If you have not been organized by someone. We are old enough to know those lies. It's not the first time that people even tried to show, dramatizing on abductions and so forth and so on. And we obviously we have information that this is being done by some people that are in South Africa. We know it.
What could be the motive behind this?
The motive has always been stupid. Because they think that democracy entails losing of a ruling party. That's their definition. We have never seen people complaining about a former opposition party winning elections. But once a ruling party wins, it becomes trivial. It is non-democracy. It is rigging, and so forth and so on. And we even want now to look at the correct definition of democracy and who has got to define democracy.
Maybe my last question for me.
You can make them many.
For the record, here is the video that the ambassador is denying.
Fara nezvakaita nenyaya yekuti Mozambique muvakidzani wedu wakatibetsera panguva yeelection, saka hatisi taitadza kuvabetsera kuti tivabetsere kuti vawine maelection efreely.
Tabva kunovhoterawo kuMozambique kuti pamwewo tingandopinda zvakanaka kana tichidawo kunohodha kana kudi tinotoifarirawo vele rimo iyoyo yatavhotera.
Fara nekuvhotera kwatinoivhota kwataita kuvhotera vanhu kuMozambique hatafara tongosvivira kuti maresults abuda zvakanaka.
Tafara nekuvhota kwataita tichivhota kuMozambique. Tafara chaizvo. Mozambique nyikawo yatiri padhuze nayo, saka tinofanira kuvasapotawo namavhoti edu.
This is the reality which the ambassador is stubbornly denying exists. We cannot continue this meaningless dance where Zanu PF blatantly deny what has happened. What has made the situation worse is that Emmerson Mnangagwa is at present the chairman of SADC. And SADC called a special and an extraordinary summit to discuss the Mozambican elections. Last Wednesday, yesterday in fact, 2 days ago now, heads of states were supposed to meet in Harare to discuss what is happening there. Many of the heads of states did not show up. Only about 5 or so bothered to show up. What is interesting is Mnangagwa chaired that summit. It was the most inappropriate thing you could think of. How could Mnangagwa chair the summit in which he is implicated. Zimbabweans have been, there is evidence to show Zimbabweans voting in Mozambique's elections. The opposition in Mozambique have been protesting that the elections were not free, fair, and credible. So how could Mnangagwa be chairing that meeting? Yet he did. And what is worse, that SADC summit criticized the protesters, calling them terrorists. This is totally unacceptable. Of course, it's an outrage. SADC leaders should have put their foot down and say, no, Mnangagwa cannot chair the SADC summit on the election process in Mozambique in the light of their Zimbabwe being named as partly responsible for the vote rigging. It is interesting to note that the Frelimo government in Mozambique is actually reaching out with an olive branch to the opposition. This is a letter by the Mozambique ruling party inviting the opposition leader to meet on the 26th of November. That's in about 4 days' time, to discuss the political crisis. It is ironic that while the Mozambican officials are doing their best to address the root cause of the problem, they do not deny that there were irregularities. And this letter is reaching to the opposition so that they could discuss it. And yet, instead of allowing the olive branch, and you'd expect that SADC itself would also be encouraging that. If you look at the Wednesday SADC summit chaired by Mnangagwa, and they're calling the opposition supporters who have been demonstrating terrorists, that is only pouring fuel to the fire. And what is really annoying about it is that the man who is responsible for lighting that fire by allowing Zimbabweans to participate in a flawed elections, rigging the Mozambican elections, is the same guy who is now pouring fuel on efforts to reconcile the political actors in Mozambique. I believe that SADC should really step in now and tell Emmerson Mnangagwa that as much as he is SADC's chairman, he should have nothing to do with what is happening in Mozambique. SADC leaders must meet and help Mozambique end this political crisis. To allow Mnangagwa to be involved in any way is not helping the situation in Mozambique. I seriously hope that the opposition leader will take up the olive branch and sit down with Frelimo and make sure that they put the cards on the table, i.e., both sides must accept that the electoral process in Zimbabwe was flawed. There can be no denying it. Just accept it because it is true. And stop pretending that somehow the process was clean. It was not clean. I think that will be a starting point in having honest discussions in Mozambique. I believe the ideal situation for Mozambique now is for that country to have a government of national unity, similar to what we had in 2008 to 2018. And I hope that the people of Mozambique would have learned a lesson from our own mistakes, where we failed to implement even one token reform. And this time, they will implement the democratic reforms and finally put Mozambique on a democratic footing. Mozambique gained its independence from Portugal in 1975. And that country, just like Zimbabwe, has never held free, fair, and credible elections to this day. This is the opportunity to put that right. Implement the democratic reforms so that future elections will be free, fair, and credible. As for Zimbabwe, ambassador, and President Mnangagwa, and the rest of the Zanu PF regime, I think SADC should step in and make sure that they have absolutely nothing to do with what is going to happen in Mozambique. We have ignited the fire that is burning in Mozambique. The post-election protests, Zimbabwe played a part in lighting that fire. And it is ridiculous that such a regime should be allowed to play any role in what is going to happen next. That is the truth of it. The idea that Zanu PF can somehow continue to export its vote rigging skills to other countries in the region is unacceptable and must be denounced for what it is. We in Zimbabwe are desperate to get the reforms implemented and end this case of rigged elections and bad governance. While we fight Zanu PF, we do not want Zanu PF interfering in other countries' efforts to create a healthy and functioning democratic system of government. To those of you who were able to join me, thank you very much for joining me. And I hope you'll be able to do so again tomorrow. It's 6 o'clock UK time or 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Have a good night. Thank you.